Welcome into episode 104 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm Augustrometer.
This week, dial V for vulnerability. Turns out Facebook may not have been the best VPN, and Spyfone secrets left open. Another week, another 1,000 security issues. We'll hit a few on The Checklist by SecureMac. A security flub by Apple left vulnerable the pins of over 70 million customers of T-Mobile. Mac Rumors highlights a report from BuzzFeed News saying the vulnerability was discovered by security researchers Phobia and Nicholas Convict Serralo, who also found a similar flaw in the website for the phone insurance company Asurion that exposed AT&T account pins. The issue: once a person started buying a T-Mobile iPhone through Apple's site and selected the monthly payment option through T-Mobile, Apple would direct the customer to an authentication page asking for a T-Mobile phone number and a personal identification number, or PIN, or the last 4 digits of the customer's social security number. But that page didn't have a cap on the number of tries a person could take putting in the PIN or the last 4 of the social. Normally, a site would lock down guesses for a period of time after a few incorrect entries. The lack of cap meant the ne'er-do-well could pull a brute force attack, running through as many guesses as they needed to pair a PIN with a T-Mobile phone number. With the PIN, the user could conceivably make changes to an account, including transferring the associated number to a new SIM. That's particularly dangerous given the number of people whose bank accounts, social media accounts, email, and so on are tied to their phone number. Now, I said earlier that this looks like a security flub by Apple because, generally speaking, Apple gets this one right. Quoting Mac Rumors, the security vulnerability appears to have been limited to T-Mobile accounts, as the same validation page for other carriers on Apple's site uses a rate limit that locks access to the form for 60 minutes after 5 to 10 incorrect entries. Given that the other carrier pages had rate limiting enabled, it's likely Apple made an error on the T-Mobile page. As was mentioned before, Apple was not the only company to make such an error. Phobia and Convict found a similar security issue on the website for the hardware insurance company Asurion that left pins of AT&T customers vulnerable. Both Asurion and Apple have fixed their respective issues. Apple has offered no comment on the situation except to say that it's very grateful to the researchers who found the flaw, which means Apple's giving praise to a convict. What should customers do now? It sort of sounds like it depends how security-minded you are. Quoting Mac Rumors, a phone number was required for both of these attacks, limiting the number of people who may have been impacted, but AT&T and T-Mobile customers who are concerned about their account safety should choose a new PIN. So, change your PIN?
I think that's the easiest solution here. This is one of those things where it just happened. There was no bad thing that people were trying to do, so you're probably safe, but better safe than sorry. And I would change your PIN. Okay,
so you shouldn't answer this question. So I'm not going to ask the question, because I'm not going to ask you if you're an AT&T or T-Mobile person, because that puts a target on you. Honestly, though, I guess I really could ask, are you a Verizon customer? Because they're the only ones who are safe this week. We're going to get to Sprint in a moment, but if this affected you personally, would you be trying to figure out how to change your PIN?
I probably, no.
Okay.
Mostly, and I'm not. I am a Verizon customer for various reasons. And so this doesn't affect me, but if it did, I wouldn't really sweat over it. It would not keep me up at night.
See, I'm thinking about doing it anyway. I am a customer of one of the other companies. I won't say which one, although anybody who's listened to Mac OS Ken for any length of time has an idea. I might do it just because I haven't done it ever. I don't think I've ever changed my PIN. Although, as the piece points out, your PIN's a pretty big deal. And so if you don't change it, or if it does fall into someone else's hands, then that's, opening you up to all kinds of trouble, like the troubles that we've talked about. Oh, golly, since I think episode 1 of the checklist.
I think this also highlights just how far we've come from when we thought 4-digit numbers were secure. These days, that just doesn't cut it. And, you can use brute force. It's only 10,000 tries,
Right.
which is really, really fast to do. So, even on the iPhone, they've moved beyond 4 digits if you enable that. Changing it is a good idea. Getting rid of pins altogether, probably a better idea.
Well, I mean, to offer a defense for the PIN idea, I mean, when you call into AT&T or T-Mobile, I assume, okay, so now I just told everybody which carrier is my carrier. When you call into a carrier, they're looking for a few different things. Are you calling from the number associated with the account? Yes. Can you say your full name? As a matter of fact, I can. They'll ask some other question, and then they'll get to the PIN. Right?
Yeah.
Now, what you're talking about is correct. If you're just going online and just using the PIN, then that's not great. Especially if they're not going to have the form locked down. Now, if you're feeling smug because you're a Sprint or Verizon customer, bad news for, well, under half of you, certainly, because Verizon's the biggest and Sprint's the smallest. Engadget highlights a piece from TechCrunch saying that Sprint was using 2 sets of easily guessed logins that let a security researcher access a company portal with access to customer data, including for Boost Mobile and Virgin Mobile. The piece says all they needed to access customer data, change customer plans, or switch customers to a new device was a phone number and a PIN. And, see if this sounds familiar, there was no cap on the number of times the researcher could guess the proper PIN. Engadget says this isn't as big a deal as the T-Mobile and AT&T vulnerabilities because this one required knowing about a back-end portal about which most people wouldn't know. But Engadget concludes it points to a seemingly consistent problem with security at American networks. It wouldn't have taken much to hijack phone numbers and sign into accounts that require 2-factor authentication, putting social accounts and other sensitive info within easy reach. Now, let's do a variation on a theme. For this story, we say hello again to our friends Phobia and Convict, who's turning into my favorite, by the way. I love the fact he's like, yeah, I've been caught. I don't think that's really what he's saying, but I like his name. This one has the cable company Charter welcoming Time Warner cable customers in a most unwelcome way. The Mac Observer explains that Charter recently acquired Time Warner Cable. Of course, they wanted Time Warner Cable customers to register on the Charter site, and you'll never guess what happened. The Mac Observer pulls from a piece in Tech Dirt, which says the registration website tried to verify subscribers' identities by asking for their zip codes and phone numbers. But according to the security researcher Phobia, the zip code didn't need to be correct to proceed to the next page. Only the phone number associated with the account needed to be accurate. Additionally, Convict found that hackers could use a brute force software program in the phone number field. In other words, repeatedly try different 10-digit combinations because the Spectrum website did not limit the number of attempts.
I feel like we're in an endless loop of that.
Well, no kidding, right? Let me just wrap up. That means it would be relatively easy for a hacker to take over someone's account even without an accurate phone number. Like you say, it feels like we're caught in an endless loop, which is fine because you can guess as many times as you want. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here and seemingly everywhere. I mean, we know that Apple, in its case, messed up. And we know that because they've gotten it right on other sites and also because they said, hey, we messed up. They didn't apologize. They're just like, wow, glad somebody caught that. Okay, which is fine because at least they're acknowledging their error, right? What we don't say in real life is pick a number between 1 and 10, you get 10 guesses. What I'm trying to figure out is how is this an issue for as many companies as it apparently is?
I would probably put most of this into one of 3 buckets, either money, time, or user experience. I've seen that happen in multiple companies where they don't have the money to do it right, or they don't have the time to implement, another layer of security, or they just want a better user experience. I mean, I worked for a company where the person in charge of the product wanted us to, if somebody typed in their email, they wanted an error message that came back to say, I'm sorry, that email isn't in the database, which, is a really nice user experience thing. But the fact is now you've just leaked data, whether or not that email exists in that database, and they can keep trying emails until, they find one that works because you've told them that it works. I think it really falls into one of those three buckets. In this case, it's probably time, where they just wanted to get it out there. And I think, there's a fourth bucket that's a lot smaller than the first three. And I think that fourth bucket is just that a lot of these sites are old, and the technology they use is old, and they just don't keep updating them when this, new threats come about. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot. And in the case of Apple, I don't even think that we know Apple messed up. It's highly likely that they were using, they had to go to the carriers for the carriers to implement something, and they, and T-Mobile is the one that didn't do what they were supposed to do. Maybe it was Apple's fault, but, they didn't say that it was their fault, but they also didn't lay the blame at somebody else either, which is nice.
Yeah, well, except that every story that I've seen about it, and I've read quite a few, say that it was Apple and it was Asurion. There is not a tech writer out there who doesn't want to blame the carriers for something, right? So, and no article that I read about it said it's possible that it was Apple, it's possible that it was AT&T. Everything has said, yeah, this was the way that Apple implemented this, and that was bad. But again, I don't know. You've had to implement sign-in situations before. Here's what's weird to me. It's like if I said to you, okay, you want to come into this club, and you said yes, and I said, what's the password? Because I gave you the password, or somebody gave you the password before, and then you just grabbed a dictionary, right, and started reading every word until you finally hit upon the password. At some point, I'm going to say, no, that's not it. In fact, right. I would think if I'm a bouncer and I'm standing there and I say, what's the password? And the password starts with Q, and you start with something that starts with an E, you don't get a second guess with me. You just don't, unless contextually they're right. I got to figure you actually don't know, and yet here you come trying to sneak in. Right. What's a decent number here? Because something that story that I read said that between 5 and 10 guesses will usually lock somebody out for an hour. I will tell you that my bank, and it's a royal pain, but I like the fact that it happens. If I type in my password wrong, I can't remember if it's 3 times or 5 times, I have to reset my password. They don't lock me out for an hour and then give me another chance. I'm shut out at that point until sure. I can either get them on the phone, or I can go through whatever rigmarole to actually reset my password. I'm sort of surprised to hear that there is a time limit on this, but let's say there is a good number. Well, what's a good number as far as you're concerned, as far as implementation?
See, if I had the amount of time and the budget to implement it the way that I would want to, given sort of the constraints that you're laying upon me, what I would do is I would cut it off after somewhere between 5 and 10, but every guess in between, they would have to wait longer. The first one's a gimme. The second one, maybe, it's a 5-second wait, and then it's a 10-second wait, and then it's a 30-second wait. Because that will make disinterested parties go away real fast. And it would make it a lot harder to hack into something like that.
On the AT&T and T-Mobile stories that we mentioned earlier, we talked about changing your PIN, whether you want to or not. For Charter, the Mac Observer says Charter has 23 million subscribers, but not all of them are affected. People who were a subscriber of Time Warner Cable before the merger are affected, which is 14 million users. So a majority, it sounds like, of Charter's current customers. Charter won't say how many people have been affected, although the company claims that the flaws weren't actually exploited. The thing that I always come to on that is, well, how do they know? Because they didn't even know that this was happening. But we can leave off that. What would you do in this situation? Do you call Charter and complain? There's not even any point in switching to DirecTV or, some other provider, because your information's still in their system and was still, vulnerable. Or do you just cross your fingers and hope for the best?
Yeah, this is where it gets really messy. If, once your information is on the cloud, it's, it's there and people can go get it. There's no deleting anymore. And I think that that's something that we all have to get used to. But yeah, I mean, I would try and trace back. And if you're really concerned about it, and you used to have an old account with one of these carriers, go back and change all of your PINs and even have them remove that account if they can. Change your name, change the address, change the phone number, change one of those bits of information. So if somebody calls in to try and do social engineering on whoever answers the phone, that they can't identify that it's you. And if you're really concerned about it, that's where I would go.
And of course, it's a giant pain, but just like you shouldn't use the same password a number of places, if 3 places use a 4-digit PIN, it would probably be best to have a different 4-digit PIN for each of those places, because if you've got one PIN at all 3 of those places, well, it's cool because then all they have access to is your phone carrier and your bank and whoever else is holding onto that 4-digit PIN.
And don't make it a date, for crying out loud. Don't make it your birthday or the date your child was born or your anniversary or anything like that, because those are so easy to guess.
Yeah, I've actually upped my security. I don't do 1, 2, 3, 4 anymore. I've gone high tech. I've gone 2, 4, 6, 8. So I'm feeling pretty confident about my pins. So at what point do you suppose Facebook will be so bad that the planet will just say, you know what, enough with this? I'm guessing we're still at least a decade away, but, whatever. Apple Insider says Facebook has taken its Anavo Protect app off Apple's App Store, apparently at Apple's request. Anavo Protect was ostensibly a VPN service, though it did more than it said it did. Quoting Apple Insider, available as a free download, Onavo's app allowed users to create a virtual private network, or VPN, that routes internet browser traffic to Facebook servers for filtering out malicious content. The app is advertised as a consumer protection tool that blocks potentially harmful websites and secures personal information when utilizing web browsers like Safari. Sounds great, but here's the thing. It is Facebook, the Hoover of sucking up information, and they did that with the web surfing that was supposed to be secret. Although in fairness to them, they did say it was a virtual private network. Quoting the piece again, Anavo granted free access to its users' internet activity, invaluable information for firms keen on sniffing out consumer sentiment. According to the Wall Street Journal, data from Onavo was used to bolster Facebook's product and acquisition strategy and helped inform industry moves, including the purchase of WhatsApp and a venture into live video. Now, Facebook bought WhatsApp in early 2014. So if info gleaned from the virtual VPN's use was used to bolster that acquisition, that means Anavo's been out there playing cleanup with supposedly secret traffic for over 4 years. And you can't even really say it's a bad look for Facebook, because it's Facebook. I mean, this is what they do. I mean, you think it's about hooking you up with, old classmates and keeping you in touch with family, but what they're doing is just sucking up as much information as they can. They are the Dyson, the Electrolux, the Hokey of user data. So why is this app just being yanked now? It's because Apple just changed the App Store guidelines, and Onavo runs afoul of them now. In a statement on the issue to TechCrunch, Apple said, "We work hard to protect user privacy and data security throughout the Apple ecosystem. With the latest update to our guidelines, we made it explicitly clear that apps should not collect information about which other apps are installed on a user's device for the purposes of analytics or advertising or marketing, and must make it clear what users' data will be collected and how it will be used." While the takedown means iOS users won't be able to download the app, people who already have it can keep using it. That said, there will be no more updates for iThings. Meanwhile, the piece says the app remains available for Android via the Google Play Store. Now, you're relatively new to these parts, August, but the checklist has a storied tradition of beating up on Facebook, mostly because, from a privacy and security standpoint, they deserve it. What are your thoughts on the Onavo story?
I think if you're anywhere close to using a VPN that's sponsored, created, managed, or even looked at by Facebook, you are doing yourself a huge disservice. And I don't want to call you an idiot, but boy, you're certainly starting to get close to that line.
Well, I mean, it depends, I suppose, on what it is you're trying to do. I mean, if all Inavo was saying, and believe me, I'm not defending Facebook, but if all Inavo was saying was that they were going to keep you away from anything harmful on the web, they may actually have done that. If, however, you were using a virtual private network because you wanted what you did to be private, yeah, routing it through Facebook, I mean, that's like nobody read my diary. I'm just going to leave it open here on this table in the library or cafeteria where anybody could stop by and read it.
Well, the scary thing for me is that there are large swaths of the population who believe Facebook is the internet. And if Facebook is telling them to do something, then they do it because they don't really know about anything else out there on the web. All they know is Facebook. And to me, that's sort of really, really scary that we've got a generation of people who are doing this and just blindly following what Facebook says.
It is crazy that people think that Facebook is the internet because everybody knows that America Online is the internet. I wonder, it's a weird sort of Elseworlds thing to think about. I wonder what life would be like if AOL had survived and people had some idea of really how much of your information they might be holding. But, we don't have to worry about what that would be like because we have Facebook and we have Google, so it's fine. I got to say, I'm sort of amazed that Facebook has a VPN and that people would use it. I mean, witness the fact that they use people's traffic to influence their business decisions. Even if they were anonymizing the info, they could see what people were doing, which I think people think is impossible when you're talking about a VPN. But just like there's no such thing as the cloud. I mean, the cloud is a great marketing tool, but the cloud is somebody else's computer or a bunch of other somebody else's computers, right? Just like there's no such thing as the cloud. I mean, just because your info isn't being routed through easily accessible servers doesn't mean it's not being routed through somebody's servers. It has to be. That's the way it works. And so if you're talking about running your information through somebody's servers, do you want it to be somebody who is, notorious, just known for gathering as much information as they can?
Well, and they're known not only for gathering as much information as they can, but they're known for using that information to invade your privacy. I mean, you've got pretty much all of Europe is suing Facebook for the way they handle data, and Google. But, it's crazy to me. I do think that it's funny that it's, they're focused on a virtual private network, but I think what they meant was virtually private, meaning it's right. Virtually private, except for those people we give access to. Right.
They did say virtual. That's absolutely true. We're not going to sit here right now and suggest individual VPNs, although I do think that both August and I would suggest maybe not Inavo, if that's what it was called. I will suggest a show that you can listen to, though. Way back, episode 19 of the checklist, all about VPNs. That's what it was about. In fact, that's the title, all about VPNs, covering things like what is a VPN, which we just barely touched on here. Why should you use a VPN? And probably the most important part as relates to this episode, how to pick the right VPN. So SecureMac.com/checklist. There's a thing down at the bottom where you can choose which page you want to be on. Go to episode 19, all about VPNs. And just go ahead and delete Inavo if you haven't yet. Anyway, that's my advice, but I can only speak for myself. More stuff to freak you out, then hopefully make you feel better in a moment. But first, a word about MacScan 3 from SecureMac. If you think having a Mac is all the malware protection you need, you're wrong. And I don't take any joy in telling you that you're wrong. I do take joy, though, in telling you about something else that will be malware protection that you actually do need. Let me tell you first, though, why you need it. I mean, you're using a Mac. More people you know are using Macs, which mean more and more hackers are trying to hack in. In fact, the number of malicious files for Macs has increased exponentially over the last 10 years. You need to stay ahead of the bad guys, and MacScan 3 can help you do that. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by SecureMac. You know the Nikolai, right? Nicholas and Nicholas. They do a show called The Checklist, or did. They're still behind the scenes, don't worry, they'll be back. Anyway, these guys are trusted names in computer security, and they are developers of exceptional security software for the Mac, and they've been doing that for, well, those 10 years I mentioned a minute ago. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. Say goodbye to worry and hello to the cushy comfort of security with MacScan 3 by SecureMac. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by SecureMac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. So, here's something bad from the good people at Motherboard. A company that markets cell phone spyware to parents and employers left the data of thousands of its customers and the information of the people they were monitoring unprotected online. The data exposed included selfies, text messages, audio recordings, contacts, locations, hash passwords and logins, Facebook messages, and a bunch of other stuff too. That's according to a security researcher who asked to remain anonymous for fear of legal repercussions. Now, the spyware company is called Spyfone, and I will say it's hard to see how there could be legal repercussions, what with the whole thing actually being true. Motherboard says they were able to verify what they'd been told by the secret security person, that he or she had access to Spyphone's monitored devices' data by creating a trial account, installing the spyware on a phone, and taking some pictures. Hours later, the researcher sent back one of those pictures that Motherboard had taken with their dummy account. Now, when we say it was left unprotected online, the piece says the researcher found the data on an Amazon S3 bucket owned by Spyfone, one of many companies that sells software that is designed to intercept text messages, calls, emails, and track locations of a monitored device. The good guy or gal who found the info says the exposed data contained several terabytes of unencrypted camera photos. That's just over 2,200 current customers with hundreds or thousands of photos and audio in each folder coming from just under 3,700 tracked phones. The exposed data also included just over 44,000 unique email addresses. You know, August, I'm starting to think that services like this aren't that great an idea.
First of all, if your parent put something on your phone called Spyfone, get another parent.
Well, there's not a lot you can do about that, but here's the thing. I was going to come to this later, but this doesn't sound like it was being marketed towards people wanting to keep up with what their kids are doing. It's not called Child Protect. It's not called Kinder Care. It's called Spyfone, right?
Right.
I mean, this sounds more to me like I am a jealous husband or wife. I don't know. I haven't read their marketing. Maybe it is 100% aimed at protecting kids. But I mean, we can circle back around to that. Whether you're talking about kids or adults or employees or whatever, like philosophically, where are you on spyware?
I just think it's bad for a lot of different reasons. I mean, this story is an example of that. But quite honestly, if you can't trust the people who work with you or who live with you, then you've got much bigger problems, and you're not going to solve it by putting a piece of software in somebody's phone. I hate to get all touchy-feely, but that's what it comes down to. And, it's really easy to misinterpret some of this stuff. So if you see pictures from your kid's phone because you just happen to be spying on them, it could be something completely innocent, but you take it the wrong way. And then all of a sudden there's a huge fight and your kid resents it, or your husband resents it, or your wife resents it, or whatever. I think going down that path is really, really fraught with a lot of landmines. that you're better off without.
There's also, I mean, it's sort of a variation on what we've talked about before about encryption and, backdoors to encryption and whether a key for a good guy is a key for a bad guy too, right? I mean, let's say you can even justify everything that you're talking about. Let's say there's an absolute justification for why you're doing what you're doing. Okay, great. So now all of those pics that have been found by the good person in this story may have been found by a bad person as well. In fact, they could be on the hard drives of who knows how many bad people. Because, and this is what's weird, right? You're worried about your kid doing something terrible, or you're worried that your husband or wife is up to something. And you run this spyware and it turns out there are these compromising pictures, but these guys are just leaving it sitting someplace that anybody could find it. So your paranoia, even if it turns out to have been correct, may now have pictures of your kid being traded online. I mean, it's a slippery slope. It's a terrible, awful thing. And I don't want to blame the person who ran the spyware, because obviously you want to blame the spyware company. But you also kind of want to blame the person who installed the spyware as well.
Yeah. And, I do want to point out, though, and I'm going to come to the defense of Spyfone just a little bit here.
Do it.
All I have is the article. I didn't do the research that the researcher did here. All I have is the news article. But if they're obscuring this data in some way, shape, or form, it's one thing to have it just completely exposed. It's another to have it obscured. I mean, you look at like Google Docs, for example. They have private documents that are, the URL is 100 characters long and it's all random and there's no way anyone's ever going to be able to guess that URL. So if they're doing it like that, then I'm going to cut them just a little bit of slack. Because, the point of doing things like that is so that you could go home and use a web browser to view the photos or listen to the audio or what have you. And you want to do that in a way that you don't have to unencrypt it every single time you pass it. It's fairly common to do that. A lot of companies do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if they've got if it's just, your customer ID is the name of the folder that it's in, well, that's a much bigger deal. And I don't know what they're doing here. So it's hard to say. The other thing too is it says that it's just over 2,200 current customers, which means that, it's a really small percentage of people that actually could be affected here. And it doesn't sound to me like the company's going to be in business much longer if that's the number of customers that they have. Well,
you see, and I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying. I mean, to me, these sound like perhaps not the most reputable individuals. And so the fact they only have 2,200 right now, you're right. Spyfone, by the way, it's Spyfone, may be gone tomorrow. But then day after that, Spyphon may be back in business. I mean, because there's just something. You're right. 2,200 people is not that much, but I don't know how much they were charging for it. I don't know how long it's been 2,200 people. I mean, and I don't know if they're running 5 others. This piece says the company's back-end services were also left wide open, not requiring a password to log into them, according to the researcher, who said he was able to create an admin account and see customer data. Eva Galperin gets the Funny of the Show award. Eva is the director of cybersecurity at digital rights group Electronic Frontier Foundation, who says Spyfone appears to be a magical combination of shady, irresponsible, and incompetent. And honestly, Spyphone's own statements don't do a lot to shake that assessment. A representative of Spyfone told Motherboard that the company is investigating the leak and expressed relief that the person who found it had good intentions. Thank God it's as a researcher, someone good trying to protect, this person said in a phone call. He later confirmed that the data leak that affected approximately 2,200 of Spyphone's customers. He said, "We have partnered with leading data security firms to assist in our investigation and continue to coordinate with law enforcement authorities about this situation. Every day, our team takes great strides to enhance our site security, and we certainly anticipate that this recent data breach is the last. communications about the breach and the investigation have gone out to our customers. Now, we talked earlier about our philosophical stance on such programs. From a security standpoint, though, it's hard to see such apps being worth it. Motherboard says in the past 18 months, they've covered hacks on FlexiSpy, 2 separate ones on Retina X, SpyMaster Pro, Moby Stealth, and SpyHuman. The common element among all of these appears to be the company's poor, if not irresponsible, approach to security, especially regarding their most sensitive data, that of people monitored, some of whom are children. I don't know, man. It's like, how would you even know who to trust if this was the way that you were going to go?
Yeah, I think you and I both agree on the philosophical part of it. I have a real hard time even recommending, this at all, let alone, oh man, just don't do it. I'm sorry. I'm speechless. Don't do it.
Here's what I suggest, honestly. Wait until Facebook starts one, because if your child is your concern, by the way, and look, I don't want to get into anybody's personal relationships. I don't want to say if you don't trust your spouse enough that you have to put a spy thing, whatever. That's between you and your spouse and whoever else is in your lives. If your concern is your child, again, I would suggest a prior checklist. Checklist 24 would be a good one for you to check out. 5 things to know about child-proofing your kid's iPhone. And we actually talked back on that episode about whether programs like this would be a good way to go. It's been a long time since I've listened to it, so do me a favor. If you listen to episode 24 of the checklist and you say, wow, you've changed your stance entirely, let me know. I'd be a bit surprised, but let me know. Just like I say every week, we've only started down the road on these stories. If you want to go deeper, SecureMac.com/checklist is the place to do it. You'll find notes there for today's show and every show that we've done before, and you can listen to them right there as well. So checklist number 19, the deep dive into VPNs, and checklist 24, the one about child-proofing your kid's iPhone. And then all the other ones, 103 more in addition to this one. SecureMac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.